Trying to get comfortable here. Holy shit. We're actually in the green. Holy motherfucking shit. I love that. Okay. 2018. Cool. Let's go. Right. So let's turn on the opacity. Partisan lane. There we go. And alright, if I remember correctly, and then we just do it like this. Hopefully some people start showing up pretty soon. That'll put us here. Still waiting for people to show up, but hey. We're live streaming, continuing, and we're pretty darn close to being finished with this series, which means I'll move on to something else at some point. There we go. Second district, I believe, goes around the rest of the state. This time I want to sneak in and we're gonna some of this. Oh, that's great. The bit rate sucks, but at least somebody is viewing. So hey, to the viewer in chat, if you want to talk, go right on ahead. Feel free, have fun. Chat is yours right now. Hey, we're actually getting people showing up. How y'all doing tonight? Say rip to the Democrats in chat, right? There we go. Why can't I see anybody in chat right now? Type in chat if you are present in chat or watching the stream. Because I do want to talk to you a little bit. Because I think y'all are fantastic. Okay. There we go. Now, do need to be a little bit careful because this area of Utah is somewhat swingy, and it could lead to a more competitive district than I think I'm actually willing to have. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have it sneak down into this more rural section. Kind of eat up these areas. Because if I don't do that, well, at the end of the day, I'm going to have a district that is competitive when I don't want it to be competitive. And sorry about my phone deciding to send me a ping from Facebook. I don't like that. Don't use Facebook. Haven't used it in forever. Totally gerrymandered, but hey, that's kind of the way it works. I thought I saw somebody chat. Y'all able to actually chat? Because, like I said, I kind of want to make sure that you can do that. And we got rid of the very difficult state, which was Texas. Though I would really love to have been able to do that while live streaming. Obviously that didn't happen, but hey. I am using the composite, so there's a very good chance that one or two data sets of this are more competitive. Yeah, okay. Okay. This last one. There we go. All safe. Okay, so we're going to turn it on the precinct, turn off the precinct lines, put on the labels. I think that's a glorious Utah. Not even a competitive district in sight. Okay, so let's change it from composite to the governor. All safe. Senator in 2016, all safe. President in 16. I actually expect a competitive district. Not the one I expected. But goes to show you just how uncompetitive Utah is. Safe. Senator in 18. That was a bit weird. President 2008. Okay. Yeah, that's what I expected. All right. So I think the composite is pretty fair. That was easy. Why isn't chat working? Oh, no data. Fan-fucking-tastic. Mont as one district. Okay, we're on to Virginia. Use the 2010 precincts. And then the 2018 population. Okay. And as we all know, Virginia has the fairly unique rule that we aren't allowed to, or more accurately, it's an independent commission. So, number one, we have to reasonably keep districts where they are. And two, going to have to try and make it a little bit more compact, because Virginia is basically very Democratic, very Democratic, very Democratic, and then the rest of the state is basically a sea of red except for the eastern shore. So one thing I'm going to try and do is undo a few things. So we're going to put the eastern shore in the first district. I think that was Williamsburg, yeah. I guess that's went over. Yeah, a lot of people live in Tidewater. And a lot of these precincts have a metric fuck ton of people. Okay, so the second district. Okay, kind of changing up where the second is a little bit. But my reason is, I would think, reasonable. Man, I'll leave it at that. So the third is going to be here. Oh, finally I'm seeing chat. Yeah, that's one way it happens. Virginia Beach. Me trying to find a precinct that there we go. The fourth is going to be over here as well. And I mean, this is going to be a very safe Democratic district. I think I could have done this a little bit better, though. I may spend a little bit more time messing with some of the borders of these districts, because the third probably should cover a lot of this area, because that kind of looks ugly. The second looks decent. Like, I'm not going to lie. But the rest of it really doesn't. I want to be at about 900. Okay, I guess I'll do that and call it decent enough. Actually, just to make sure I don't screw it up, I'm going to actually do the 9th right now. Ooh, nice. A new Gilded Age. I have done a Georgia map so far. Quite a while back, Blue. And I'll showcase the map when we get there. Yeah. Okay, so the 6th is the next district, and that's mostly the Shenandoah. Okay, there we go. So 7th. I guess I should probably do the 10th first. Okay, that's going to include Loudoun and I guess parts of Fairfax County. Because that's a thing that exists in real life. God, this is so ugly. Whatever, I'm going to call that good. I guess I should do the 7th now. Okay. It's part of Manassas Park. And that's a big problem, is you almost need the blocks when you get to Nova. So the 8th is basically this part. So here, whoop. Okay, so the 11th. No, I want it to include those areas. Let's go back to the 8th. And let's select these areas. Give me just a second. I'll check chat in about 2 seconds. Huh. Yeah, there's no way that's going to happen, Pink Panther. Neat. I'm thinking about doing something where I have a fictional World War III. because I think that's a pretty cool idea. And I'm trying to figure out where that would start. Yeah, that's reasonably close enough. I mean, the 7th actually looks better than one of the 7ths I've done, and everything else looks not horrifying, so I think I'll leave it. Okay, so first thing is we're going to do that. Turn on district lines, the labels, get rid of all of those. Yeah, that actually doesn't look as bad as I thought it was going to look. I mean, yeah, I probably could have changed a few things, and I think I will. So I'm going to turn back on the precinct lines and deselect the 2nd and the 3rd. And I'll actually include that there and then switch to this and go here. The 3rd is still too much, so I'll do this and there we go. Yeah, that made it look a lot cleaner. Okay. So let's go ahead and see what the partisanship is. My expectation is the 6th, 9th, 5th, and 1st are going to be GOP. The 2nd, 4th, 10th, 11th, and 8th are going to be Democratic. 7th and 3rd, I'm not entirely positive. Those will be more competitive, methinks. Okay, the 1st and the 7th are pretty competitive, but they're GOP leaning, so it's 5 to 6. It's actually very proportional. Well, see, if we're going to be talking about a Second World War or a Third World War, we need to think about what would actually cause it. Okay, so Senator 2018, yeah, that's what I expected. The 6th was a lot more competitive than I thought it would be. Governor 2017, okay. Lieutenant Governor, okay. AG, okay. President 2016. President 2008. Senator 2018, I think, was the most blue. And I mean, that's not an unfair map. Like I said, I don't think this is a bad map. Composite probably slightly favors the Republicans, but I would expect that the 1st and the 7th would ever so slightly tilt towards the Republicans. I don't think this is exactly what's going to happen, but hey. So, if we're talking about a Third World War and what would cause it, we have to think about what caused the last few global conflicts that were, well, we'll call them world wars, right? And let's start with the first truly global conflict, and that was actually the 7 Years' War. And I'm actually going to discuss why I don't think there will be another civil war in America, because the American Civil War, because war is not what's going to happen. It just won't anymore because of, I'll say, reasons but it's a lot more accurate to think about it in the way that if your population or if your nation gets most of its resources from the land, or say um, so I should really turn on district lines. There you go. Basically from something that can be pulled from the ground, then a civil war is very likely. The reality is that in the United States, this is not the case. The vast majority of American productivity is from the people. And it's very, very difficult to make that equation work in such a way that a person is willing to take a fairly comfortable job, even if it's not ideal to, their further economic well-being. Even if it's not perfect, that equation still works out in favor of the status quo. It's basically the reason why shit like January 6th didn't spiral out of control. Because the people are the most productive part of America. Good luck proving to... That's the 8th in this area. Good luck proving to Americans that they'd be better off overthrowing the government, risking their lives, their homes, their families in order to completely change everything. It's actually one of the reasons why centrism and our political parties tend to favor more centrist candidates, right? It has nothing to do with, oh, people just don't see the wisdom of insert extremist ideology here. It has everything to do with the fact that the status quo is actually really good for America. So all the toxicity in our political discourse in the modern era, it's just a bunch of wind. It's a lot of hot air. So if you're going to try to create a fiction around the idea of another civil war in America, you... All right. Thank you, OBS, for rekindling everything. The next thing that you have to discuss is where the types of people that are most likely to revolt. And you're not going to have a communist uprising in America because the people who are communists in America aren't the types of people who are going to rise up and revolt. Because the types of people who are communists in the United States are college-educated white kids who are angry at their parents. they aren't the types of people that OG communists like Marx and Lenin and Stalin would have targeted. Basically, we're talking about people who just... Actually, I should really do the 8th now. Who have issues with society. They have complaints which just they don't realize how good they have it, is basically what I'm trying to say. But anyway, for when we're talking about a third world war, we need to think about what started the others and what started all the global conflicts that we've had over, I guess, modern history. And we'll start with I guess the smart thing to do would be to start with the 7 Years' War and discuss what was the big cause of that. Well, if you want to say, well, it was George Washington at, I think, Fort Duquesne in Pittsburgh area. I mean, you'd be correct from a technically correct standpoint. The issue is that you're technically correct is kind of just a situation of he was the power, he lit the match, but the fuel was already on the ground. And a good situation that does not make. Basically, what I'm saying is that if it wasn't George Washington, it was going to be someone else who lit that fuse. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But we need to understand the context. It was really just, I guess, 2 colonies or nations that were within a sphere of influence of 2 of the great powers of the era that erupted into fighting. And that spiraled out of control and into a global conflict, a world war, right? First World War was well, actually, no, we should probably go to the Napoleonic Wars next. Because the Napoleonic Wars were the next World War, as it were. And why does that matter? Well, what was the cause of the Napoleonic Wars? Well, you could say it was Napoleon invading everything, but it was really a result of the French Revolution. I don't think any reasonable historian would disagree with that. And, well, if we're going to be discussing what could cause a World War III, I think it's important to understand this. And, well, Napoleon had seen that France was actually kind of in a weak position if all of Europe ganged up on him. So he thought, well, let's gang up on Europe first. Basically, the oversimplified meme of they might band together and kill you. Then why don't we kill them first? And to be fair to Napoleon, that wasn't a bad strategy. Especially given that he had already beaten the ever-loving tar out of Austria, which was a great power of the era. He had already beaten the tar out of Prussia, or was about to. And of course, that was back in the era. The Holy Roman Empire was somehow still a thing back then. So it kind of made sense to try and secure French interests. And, in order to fund it, I think he was not unreasonable. In his assumption that he would need to yeah, I knew that was going to be way over the line. Okay. Let's use the brush tool just to make things easier. Okay. Because I'm probably could be cleaned up a little bit. Okay, let's turn this back on and drop this. Oh my god. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna do this. And then use the brush again. Okay. Now, the reason why I'm doing Washington like this is Washington also has an independent commission. The next two states don't. And technically, Wisconsin doesn't even have bipartisan control because of, well, a weird budgeting rule that the GOP might try to exploit. Actually, this doesn't look terrible. Well, I may as well turn it on so I can see the partisan leader. You know what? Honestly, that's kind of what I expected. Washington really is that heavily Democratic of a state. I'm sure you could gerrymander in a a Republican majority, but don't think I'll try it. Funny. So, the Napoleonic Wars were basically France trying to defend itself against perceived threats against all of its neighbors. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think the composite is reasonably fair. We might actually finish this series tonight, which would be pretty cool. Because we got West Virginia. And actually, West Virginia, it really actually doesn't matter. Because, well, we know both districts are going to be so heavily GOP. And I can do it without a single county split. Now that is what I call based. And I don't think there's a single map here where President 2008 will look. Oh, actually wasn't as uncompetitive. Thank you for reconnecting. The next major global conflict was, of course, the First World War. And I'll be 100% honest with you. Again, an interconnected web of global alliances, plus the, unfortunate event of one small error, and you have, a situation of I'm actually gonna, I don't really care all that much about where districts actually sit in real life. At least not in this series. Reality is that the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was insignificant for the start of the First World War. If it wasn't him, something else would have started it. And it probably would have been something in the Balkans. Because even if you dislike one or all of the major global powers at the time, they knew that directly and intentionally starting a conflict was a really dumb idea. Though Germany would wargame it and plan it out, even they understood how bad of an idea it was to intentionally go looking for one. So they would avoid it, right? And instead, it would always have been some minor power doing something over, well, ethnic nationalism. Okay, so I guess the next thing is I'm going to try to draw out. Let's see, Milwaukee. Okay. And I'm actually going to switch it to the map colors, that way I can see better. Now we'll see if the Republic, and, well, as we know, the war spiraled way out of control way too quickly. However, it could have actually not escalated near as much as it did. Basically, Britain might not have gotten involved if France had, or if Germany had decided not to use Belgium as a launching point. After all, we have to remember Alsace and Lorraine were controlled by Germany prior to the First World War, and that denies a decent French defensive position that would later be used in the Second World War, or leading up to it, to try and discourage Germany from launching an invasion where they directly to France. But even in the First World War, the Germans were like, well, why do we need to go directly into France when we can try and sneak up on them and take them from behind? And so they went through Belgium, and that's what really caused it to spiral out of control. That and the Germans playing it a bit too cavalierly with American neutrality and American shipping with unrestricted submarine warfare. Could I potentially use it to sneak into Kenosha? I can. And that actually will make these districts all that much more red if I take... There we go. Now that is how you do it. Okay. Yeah. And Yeah, the Second World War was really just a continuation of the first, in my opinion. And I say that because, number one, it's actually, I think a reasonable historian would say it's hard to argue against that. Because at the end of the day, number one, it was. And number two, the Treaty of Versailles is the reason for basically everything, and the Great Depression kind of just kicked it off. If that makes any sense, right? And the Great Depression was basically just, it gave a reason to push everybody towards extremism. And unlike the First World War, well, unlike in the First World War, the time between it and the previous super major global conflict, it hadn't been nearly so far in the past that people had completely forgotten how horrible war was. I think there's a very good argument to be had that without the rampant political extremism in Germany or Russia, aka the Soviet Union, the war would have even occurred. I don't think that's an unfair assessment of the political reality of the time. Though it is always hard to properly assess something like this. Given, what political extremism entails. Given what political extremism actually entails, I don't think it's an unfair assessment to say that, yeah, political extremism absolutely contributed to the Second World War actually being a thing. The Cold War would be the next one, and even though it didn't heat up, the type of fighting it was absolutely does matter. And that was just basically a long list of proxy wars or conflicts between the major powers that were fought directly by the smaller local authorities, right? And I definitely find it hard to argue that it was entirely unavoidable. I think that because the Soviet Union hadn't had its political extremism basically purged, at least not nearly to the extent of the Allies. There we go. Let's turn off the precinct lines. Put it there, put the labels on, even though it doesn't really freaking matter. Oops, I almost forgot that. There we go. And this is actually our last state. Yeah, Versailles was not as bad as some of the other treaties, but it was bad. Let's take a look at some of the data sets. So, Senator in 2018. Yeah, that is kind of what I expected. Because Baldwin really did have a poor opponent in Vukmer. What data set is this? Attorney General in 2018. Okay. Governor in 2018. Yep. President in 2016. Yes, that's, yeah. Senator in 2016. President in 2008. Yeah. That's the opposite. I think the composite is actually reasonably close. But we'll see exactly how Wisconsin does it. There's a very good chance that they actually draw a fair map. But there's a weird loophole that the state legislature might try to use in Wisconsin. So I'm actually going to take the time here and talk about what I mean by, since this is now officially the end of the redistricting series, I'm trying to think of what to do from the next series. I might do Political Process. I might play Hearts of Iron 4 or another game. Or I may try and do a World War III series. And if I do a World War III series, the way it's going to be is as if I'm teaching a history class. I'm going to script a lot of it, and I'm going to kind of cover it as if we're doing a lesson in a class, and therefore chat is basically going to be a situation of y'all will ask questions and maybe I'll get to elaborate on them. And in that instance, what I want to harp on you is you need to realize that what the cause of the war is, because if I do that, I want you to, in the comments section of this stream, after it's uploaded to YouTube, I want you to give me some proposals for what you think World War III might, basically where it starts, who are in the major factions, and the types of conflict it'll be. But I want you to realize where we are. Number one, there's the fighting the last war syndrome, which basically means military commanders and political minds will see any conflict in the lens of the previous one. So a war in the next 2 to 3 decades, people are going to see it in terms of the war on terror. And that's the type of conflict they will be prepared for. And the reality is that the conflict that they actually get is going to be very, very, very different. Second,
you need to be realistic about where it's going to start. The United States is not just going to declare war on China, for example. Most global conflicts, most of what we would call world wars, actually started from minor skirmishes that escalated way out of hand. So think Serbia yeeting the Austro-Hungarian Archduke, and that leading into a war which, if Austria had pursued conflict at the appropriate time, there's a not insignificant chance that Russia wouldn't have escalated it. Instead, Russia jumps in, and of course Germany gets Austria's back because Germany wrote a blank check and then didn't realize that Austria was piddling around and wasting their time. And of course, when Russia joins in, France also joins in. Germany decides we're going to go through Belgium, and then Britain joins in. And eventually the United States gets wrapped in for sort of unrelated reasons. World War II is kind of a weird example, because Germany, or under the leadership of Angry Mustache Man, decided that he was going to try to conquer all sorts of land that had been German at one point or was inhabited by ethnic Germans. So Austria, the Sudetenland, and then he took all the rest of Czechoslovakia, and then he wanted Poland, and to keep the Russians off his back, he signed a secret non-aggression pact. It was not an alliance, but then he said, I like the idea of going through Belgium to get to France. We're going to do that again. And it worked. And then he turned on the Soviets earlier than maybe he was planning or hoping to do, because the Soviets had a miserable performance against the Finns in the Winter War. And the Winter War actually kind of sometimes gets lumped into World War II, because, well, the continuation war between Finland and the Soviet Union was definitely a part. Finland were co-belligerents with Germany against Russia for some time. And, of course, Japan decides that they're going to try and keep the U.S. out of the war for a little bit of time. The Japanese actually knew they were almost certainly going to fight the Americans, and that no matter what they did, the Americans would eventually recoup their losses from any strike on their naval targets. And Japanese wanted to basically put off American intervention for as long as possible. Problem is, they didn't take out America's carriers, and therefore we were able to basically ignore Pearl Harbor in terms of military capability. I mean, did it hurt? Yeah, absolutely. But it could have been far, far worse. The Cold War, I guess, while you could say it was diplomatically started, it was kind of just these are just diplomatic tensions until the Korean War, which was, again, just two minor nations that were fighting each other that the major powers happened to take different sides on. And then, of course, you had, Vietnam, you had a lot of conflict in Africa, conflict in South America, and you get the point, right? And, of course, the 7 Years' War was also a situation. French troops in the Ohio River Valley ran into colonial militia that said, no, this is British land. And that escalated, of course. The Napoleonic Wars, again, that was kind of just Napoleon. And by that point, France wasn't really a global power because they were in such disarray. It was France being like, or Napoleon being like, whoa, so my power is threatened if I don't go on the offensive and get rid of the Holy Roman Empire. And hey, maybe we'll get some sweet new deals out of it. Let's install a puppet government in Spain and one in the Netherlands. And hey, maybe we can get one in Poland. Use that as a launching off point. So the reality is, don't look at the obvious places that it will start. Look at where the major powers have interests. Look at where they have opposing allies. And look at what is important in the modern era for making a nation operate. And here's the thing, the United States is, while definitely a global superpower, in a kind of unique position among historic superpowers. Even the Soviets had issues that they had to address. Which is weird because the Soviet Union was, and Russia, one of the few nations that can argue to be in a similar position to the United States in being able to function without any international trade. But the Soviet Union still does actually have to do it because for, I'd say, about at least half the year, 70 to 80% of their land is kind of unusable. Russia has a much shorter growing season than the United States. The United States could feed itself ad infinitum. We have enough resources that we don't have to import anything if we don't want to. And we're so geographically isolated that our only threats, the only realistic threat of invasion is from Canada, which Canada is an ally, and the other one is Mexico, and Mexico is not a good, they're not a competent military power. And that's ignoring the fact that the United States spends, I think, 3 times as much on our military. We spend 3 times as much on our military than the next nation. I think the next 5 or 6 nations combined, we spend more than them on our military. So, yeah. The other thing you have to consider is that space is going to be a frontier in the next war. In the next major global declared conflict. The other thing is, people are going to say, oh my god, but a declared war means nukes. It actually doesn't. I don't think nuclear weapons are going to be something that is used by the great powers. It's going to be a deterrence for use of nukes by other great powers. Instead, you're only going to have minor nations using them, or even considering the nuclear option. You won't have a nation like the United States or China or Britain considering it. Hell, I don't even think Iran would consider it. So, yeah. You have to consider all of those factors when trying to come up with a scenario for World War III that would actually make sense. But anyway, I think I'm going to end the stream here. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this series. And next week I'll be starting, maybe not a new series, but I'll be doing something ridiculous on live stream, and in the next few weeks I'll start the new live stream series on whatever I decide about. So take it easy, y'all. Have a nice day, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye bye.